This is where he went. Raziel, not Torel. Raziel arrives 30 years prior to Blood Omen in the fortress of the Seraphan. Mobius tries to butter him up for his task of killing Kain, as this is the altered timeline where Mobius runs a crusade to kill all vampires. He aims Raziel in the right direction and lets him roam. In the process, Raziel explores a stronghold, gushing over what he assumes was his former life as the holiest holy shit of the holy shits, and stumbles across a broken Soul Reaver. Curious, he gives the blade a tickle, and the Wraith sword he's been using fixes the broken sword. This seems to turn the blade on, though, and it starts to leech Raziel of his life. Oh my. At that same moment, Mobius decides to make the poor decision to be in the same room, and Raziel suspects something might be amiss from the guy who has a literal snake staff. Realizing the safer choice would be to actually kill him here and now, as he has a bit of a reputation, Raziel just walks off because he's given the old guy a little bit of a spook. But not before Mobius gives us his best Mr. Burns impression, unhindered by his own stupidity. Raziel just saunters out and takes a moment to admire the vibrant scenery of azure blue skies, verdant green grass, and dead humanoid vampires. His sightseeing tour eventually takes him to the Pure Pillars and Kain. They have another war of words, and while the first-timer may expect a boss fight, Kain instead bails without a single lightning bolt. I mean, it helped that this was the moment that Ariel is shivved and Malpraptor finds her somewhere else, but causing the pillars to get corrupted before his eyes let Raziel become amenable to listening to Kain's viewpoint. Raz instead goes off to explore some more and opens a door specifically designed for the Reaver. Past the door, he's led into the underbelly of the pillars and starts off one of the series' more annoying quirks, History via Mural. Raziel reads into what's presented before him before a familiar voice tells him otherwise.
Lies, Raziel.
Turns out Hermaeus Frollo, the Elder God, didn't just stay in the far future and has plenty more to say. Raziel gets chewed out for letting Kain go, but aside from his new righteous self-opinion, he also has a great deal of choice backtalk for his eldritch horror Hefe.
I no longer seem to need you, yet I'm guessing you still need me.
He also insists it is his choice to make when Kain dies before swimming off. Raziel soon ends up in the Termagant Forest, a location from Blood Omen that is home to another of Nosgoth's notorious residents. Sensing he's being spied upon, Raziel goes to confront Voyardor, though only finds cause enough to enter a random shrine and get himself a dank Reaver. After he's done, Voyardor rewards him with some kind words.
You're a ragged excuse for a savior.
The two quip back and forth in a linguistic exercise session for a bit before Voyardor poofs away to better things. Raziel then just saunters off again to another temple, the Light Temple, where he gets the Light Reaver, and resolves to use the second time machine chamber he saw earlier to go somewhen else. Before he can do this, however, Raziel spots a fresh vampire kill and deduces Kain's the only one ballsy enough to do that inside the stronghold. Sure enough, the Golden Theolog stands waiting at the coffin of William the Just. He's got a bit of a history lesson that plays into his notion that fate is solidly pre-written, except for that one instance with himself and William. Surprisingly, Kain sort of accepts blame for the timeline being fucked up and said it was all set up by Mobius and the Soul Reaver. The catch is that if it is ever doubled in any given place, that the Soul Reaver causes a glitch and lets historical events become loose for the altering. Raziel, feeling he's been burned by Kain before, rejects this until Kain willingly gives him a chance to avenge himself. Though Raz is still unsure of this opportunity, he puts the theory to the test. He points out that he could kill Kain at that moment, and that fact should frighten his former god. The latter tells him that that is the history that is meant for them. Raziel then feels that pull, and by sheer force of will, shoves the Soul Reaver into Will.
Poor William.
This causes jumbliness as the timeline is somehow altered. Feeling his bullshit cup overfloweth, Raziel walks off set, He finds the time chamber he wanted, cracks it open, and gloats at a somewhat dumbfounded Mobius.
I like that look on your face, Mobius.
In so many words, he tells the old sorcerer to go f*** himself and forget him. Yeah, I'm sure Mobius will do just that. Raziel then hops through time, and he's not where he wanted to be. What Raziel wanted was the simple past. What he got was the monster-infested future of America in 2007, Nosgoth after Blood Omen. Raziel now has to trudge through the stronghold again, as it's now infested with creatures that have knives and clamps for hands, and the spirit of Mobius past. Or present. Or future. Hard to tell with him. Then, more trampling through the same road from earlier in the game, coming back to the Pillars, having a testing conversation with Ariel, having an even testier conversation with the Elder Galactus, going back to the Swamp Forest and climbing a new wall caused by erosion. It should be noted at this point, Raziel's motivation has shifted from killing the guy who killed him to trying to find Nosgoth's version of Dracula, Janos Audron. If you're not sure who that is, he was first mentioned in the original Blood Omen. You used his heart a lot to regain your life. Raziel somehow thinks he'll have something relevant to say about his destiny after talking to Vorador. To this end, Raziel arrives at a town called Ushtenheim, though I'm not sure how he knew that. In any case, run some more, fight some more, eventually find the destroyed area of Janos Audron. Raz feels close to his goal, but obviously late by several hundreds upon hundreds of years. Then, Kain turns up, and the two have a heart-to-heart. Kain warns Raziel of the danger they face, and the Blue Bomber just seems to have an aggrandized sense of self that borders on the delusional. Kain takes off, and lets Raziel go find himself a Wind Reaver. It's perfect to smash through stone doors with cracks in them. Raziel hits up the past and finally finds some real Seraphan. And it seems his boyhood crush over them has faded a little bit after a few examples of orderly, structured execution. He goes through his old brethren back to the area and solves a whole bunch of puzzles involving gazpacho soup until he finds the Dracul of his dreams who just so happens to know his name.
Raziel?
And let me tell you, Janos is one woke bae.
You must hate them.
They fear what they don't understand, and they despise what they fear. But no, I do not hate them.
The two talk about the history of the vampires, the importance of the prophecy, the importance of the Pillars, Raziel's role in all this, and the significance of the Reaver. Feeling justifiably uneasy, Raziel rejects the sword. Unfortunately, he's going to wish he hadn't, as his progress to the area paved the way for those rascally Seraphan brothers. Bae sends Raz away to the Fire Temple, where he can keep warm and have all the warm tomato soup he could eat, and not get bullied by those... Oh, he's gonna bust out. He's gonna run out in the time to see his bae get mutilated by his former human self. Because Janos is defeated, his Castlevania starts to break apart upon his demise. This causes the brothers to flee, and future Raziel has one final tender moment with Janos before dying. Now pissed off and ready to use a shiny new Fire Reaver, try not to think about it. Though he is accosted by even more demons and knights along the way, but none of them deter him. The Elder God scolds him once more, but Raziel just feels content in his invincibility. Raziel begins to storm the Seraphan fortress. He kills anyone in his path, and then all of a sudden, there's the Reaver. In his mesmerized moment, he fails to notice Mobius, who is accompanied by a very embodied Malik. Turns out, Mobius was being sneaky and villainous all along. He's also the reason the original Circle was slaughtered in Blood Omen, as he kept Malik a little longer than was advisable in future Circle security brochures. Mobius eventually leaves him with the sword, and Raziel just goes on whatever path is available. Sure enough, he ends up fighting all of his old brothers, and even that one that you've already forgotten about. Turns out he actually was invincible as long as he had the Reaver. Finally, he catches up to his old self. Seeing a pompous, self-absorbed asshole with luscious lips and a haircut 1993 adored who kills indiscriminately, Raziel does the only rational thing and leaves the prick dead on the ground. He ponders it very little until something crosses his mind.
My history comes full circle.
His Wraith Blade leaves him to rejoin the physical sword and then attacks him. It is here that Raziel realizes that the Wraith Blade was not only a living entity, but his own soul. He was the reason the Soul Reaver eats souls, and it would try to absorb him into it. Kain watches from not far off, seemingly waiting as Raziel weakens. His hope fading, his sense of self drowned in a mire of misery so thick, and then... yoink! Kain is convinced that this is the history-defying action that will free them both. However, his own memories seem to prove him wrong as he realizes something called the Hilden suckered them, and he then tries to warn Raziel to keep his bae dead. Though apparently Raz misses this memo and becomes despondent over the reality of his destiny.
History abhors a paradox.
He says history abhors a paradox, but I think he's just upset no one likes him. And with cliffhangers like these, where are we to argue it? We don't know who the Hilden are, and Raziel is pretty much defeated. That's it. Still, take a moment to ask, what horrible things did Kain see as history was reshuffled? What measures of atrocity did the world suffer as a result of his carelessness? Okay, this game isn't that bad, even though some consider it the black sheep for a lot of reasons. Especially since it leaves more questions than answers, adds nothing new or substantial to the existing plot, and acts more as a side story despite its prequel/sequel status. Essentially, in the altered timeline from Soul Reaver 2, Kain takes his time conquering the land. Instead of raising the Seraphon instantly, he gathers a bunch of vampires who probably remind him of himself. This ends up being disastrous, as during a battle in a town called Meridian, he's defeated by a newly formed Seraphon order and an unusual-looking holy leader with a head of flaming green hair. 200 years after that, and 400 years after the first Blood Omen, Kain wakes up with partial amnesia to a very low-polygon Angelina Jolie replica named Uma. What follows are Kain's attempts to regain his power, overthrow the Seraphon, regain the Soul Reaver, resume his conquest of the land, and play well with others. And somehow, Vorador and Janos are still alive. No explanation given for either. Just, there they are. Oh, and the Hilden are banished creatures from another dimension who hate the vampires who threw them in there, and wear pretty blue muumuus. But Kain kills them all, and everything is back to normal. Like nothing in Soul Reaver 2 mattered. Because it didn't. Finally, we come back to the main story, where Kain returns to the Seraphon stronghold on the lookout for Mobius, feeling that he might be the only one who knows where Raziel ended up. Kain tears through the knights that were a pain in the ass in the last game like tissue paper. Sure, he gets humiliated by Mobius a bit, but he repays the favor, though he finds out nothing new and is instead urged to go somewhere west of the pillars for answers. In short, it's a citadel for the ancient vampires. In the meantime, but also 500 years into the future, Raziel is making amends with the Elder God, and by amends I mean... running out of the underworld again. Elder God gets cross about this and takes away Raziel's portals back to the real world. But our blue blazer doesn't relent and eventually discovers he can come back as a zombie and then change that zombie into the mutilated husk that he's been complaining about for 2 games now. He finds himself in a graveyard, and coincidentally, which happens to be where the human Kain was buried before busting out for a sangria, he's reunited with longtime friends the Mobius mob, and even Ariel, who's dressed a lot nicer than I recall. The game prompts another Vorador visit while regaining all the elemental Reavers you previously acquired because f*** you'll play it. Kain, in the meantime, but 500 years in the boring past is being boring. He's looking at murals, fighting a band of primitive humans who survive on God only knows what, and stone angels. Lots and lots of stone angels. Don't worry, you can blink. They don't send you back into the past, but they do waste your minutes by the dozen, you fossilized pieces of... So then Raziel shows up and explores the best designed and padded part of the rejected concept of Resident Evil 4 and gets himself the H2O Reaver. Raziel can then finally have himself another talk with Vorador, whom he now blames for being the dick who rigged the sword to eat him. Of course, Vorador points out that he just smelted it, not delted it. Come back to me, I can do better than that. Despite being a lousy messiah, Vorador decides to give Raziel a present by showing him preserved Janos. Somehow, probably through the power of positive thinking or something, his unattached heart kept his body fresh and waiting. Vorador knows that it's kept at Avernus Cathedral, where nothing but goodies reside. Of course, Kain is told that Raziel is also after the heart from a friendly voice calling itself,
I am the oracle of your ancestors.
Because anyone calling themselves that here is all for the betterment of Nosgoth's adventurers.
Death has taught you well.
Kain dives into the future, Raziel hits up the church, finds that one vampire brother he missed during the first go-around in Soul Reaver, and catches up with Mortanius, who seems a little more rock star than we remember. It's through this conversation that we learn the heart of Janos Audun resides inside of Kain and has all along. Sure enough, Kain chooses this time to show up. Raziel's all for the destined clash of heroes now, and the two have a tussle that re-exposes Kain's insides to some fresh air.
Woe to the conquered!
He's blasted off into hell again, and Raziel just carries on, trying not to think about what he's done. He meets up later with Mobius, who should be carrying his own head in a bowling ball bag, but is instead gloating like we've been unpunked all along. The mob wants a fight, Raziel gives them one. He runs all the way back to his bay, shoves the Heart of Darkness back inside, and boom. Instant hotness. But Raziel is not as starstruck as he was before. He has questions, and he's only accepting answers. So Janos better cough up some... Oh, we're going back to the Citadel. Great. You're basically saying that the vampires all should worship the Elder God. And the worst part about being a vampire was being immortal. And now Raziel has to enter some chamber for reasons. Okay, whatever. He goes, the Elder God busts through, and makes fun of him for killing Kain, as his was the only destiny that apparently mattered. Raziel doesn't buy it and prods him with the Reaver a few times to avoid snuffing out the Spirit Forge. And then, in a dire moment, a lone figment of beauty reveals herself to... Oh, good God! And I thought she was unsettling to look at with only half a face. Anyway, Raziel gets a little tender instead of just stabbing the ghost of this poor woman who's already been through enough, but is utterly confused as what to do with the new Reaver as it was meant for Kain. You know, who is totally not alive anymore. 0 hour finally hits, and Raz has a balcony seat for it. The pillars go kablamo, the dark entity formerly known as Hashak Gik and the Seraphan Lord, I like to call him Hag, possesses the body of Janos. He shows mastery of Villain 101 with a minor in Shakespeare studies, and is fine dancing for a little bit. Raziel enters his final battle in the game series, defeating Janos but unable to kill him. This goes as well as you'd expect.
You should have listened to me.
And now it's back to the underworld for more villainous gloating. It seems all is lost. The Spirit Reaver cannot harm the Elder God. Raziel has no escape, and hope seems... Surprise! Kain's erection powers activate. I'm not even going to try to make sense of this because no real explanation is given. Kain survives, fights waves of monsters, and his instincts just tell him to go back to the Citadel. F it, why should I care if they don't? He goes back, finds Mobius, who also had a resurrection super, and hits him with a super of his own for one more KO. Annoyed by his own death again, Mobius grovels for one more chance, and then gets another stabbing for his trouble. This causes him to see the true form of his god, and Raziel delights in finally being able to eat his soul. And this is the best part of the game.
Spin on this, Mobius.
The Elder God seems not to care much, and in his boasting doesn't notice Raziel formulate a simple plan. Possess the newly minted corpse of Mobius that would then get Kain to stab him, so he can re-enter the Reaver, thus giving Kain the purified Soul Reaver and a final moment with his undead son. This allows Kain to finally see the Elder God and engage it in a decisive battle. until it seems like the entire place is gonna fall and Kain vapes away. The Elder God makes some final calls to his vampire adversary, prompting another out-of-place quip.
In the meantime, you'd best burrow deep.
And then the ending. Kain overlooks the destruction he caused, confident in what he was fighting for, and lingering on how Raziel was able to give him something he'd never truly had before. Hope. Which is what many of the fans were left with, as this is how the series ends. It never saw a follow-up to this moment. While many of the burning questions of the previous games were answered, there were still several left, including what was Kain planning to do with a weapon capable of defeating a god? But this is not exactly about what could have been. Not yet. The question at hand is, does the story of Kain, Raziel, and their struggle against fate still hold up to the ravages of time?
Time, Kain? Next time.